We start off strong with 3 men in the middle of nowhere, with a burning corpse by their side and 3 shovels that dig into the earth one after another until the hole is deep enough for their new guest. Then, when the job is done, everyone leaves without saying a word. It's clear that for them, this is an everyday job. We move from that eerie scene to the interior of a car, where we meet Bull, who prepares his trusty revolver for that night. The taxi driver makes a few small talk questions. If Bull were to use this weapon soon, he plans to ensure that it is not turned against him. The driver asks him where he has been, and Bull replies that he spent 10 years in hell, but is now back and doesn't plan to return. A few minutes later, they reach their destination, a scarcely frequented street full of auto repair shops. There, Bull gets out and calmly approaches one of the workshops. As soon as he is close enough, he draws his weapon and fires repeatedly at a man. Then he throws the weapon into the taxi and tells the driver to leave, as he plans to walk from now on. The next morning, Bull is at an amusement park where his mind is haunted by several bitter flashbacks. Images of him sharing moments with his son and enjoying the rides. It is here that we finally learn the purpose of his violence. He was betrayed by his team, a team that was set free while he spent 10 years away from his family, rotting in exile, and now he has returned and plans to hunt them down one by one. This is his revenge for having been left behind. The next target on his list is Cheryl, his ex-brother-in-law. Bull has entered his house and has his husband tied to a chair. Under the threat of slitting his throat, he demands that Sherry reveal the whereabouts of his son Aiden. But Sherry either does not know or is unwilling to say. Enraged, Bull not only cuts Sherry's wife's throat, but then follows her, her blood ruining the expensive carpet, all while Bull departs without showing any remorse. Elsewhere in the city, we meet Gary, who lives in a rural area and spends his days fixing cars. That morning, he receives a call informing him of what happened to Sherry and her husband. Alarmed, he drives to Norm's house, the leader of a local gang, and explains what is happening. 2 of his old slackers are dead, and everything happened in less than 24 hours. So, this is not a coincidence. Norm, who turns out to be Bull's former father-in-law, calls his daughter Sharon to tell her that she should leave the house for a few days. He needs to sort out this matter and does not want her present. Sharon begs her father to get justice for her sister. Whoever did this wants him dead. In response, Bull has already arrived at a guy named Adam's place and tells him to call his father and say that he sends his greetings. The boy obeys more out of fear than respect. Upon hearing his son mention Bull's name, Marco panics and begs him to return home immediately. Then he calls Norm for help, but Norm will take too long to arrive. Meanwhile, Bull is already waiting for Marco on the porch to talk. The first thing Bull does is ask him about his son Aiden. He wants to know where he is, and if Marco tells him, he will forgive his family. And terrified Marco says he had no other choice. They were following orders. Those words cause Bull to collapse. He lunges at Marco and kills him with a knife that he plunges into his mouth up to the nape while Marco bleeds out. We have time for another flashback. In this one, we see Norm having a barbecue with his family. Bull and his son are present. Everything is happiness and togetherness, since Norm is the leader of the gang, and the jobs he secures have ensured a good life for all the members. The second in command is Bull, being his son-in-law and the one who will probably lead when Norm is gone. After the barbecue, Norm gathers the team and takes them to a huge meat processing factory. There, he meets with Eden, the owner who has a huge outstanding debt and is now out of time. With no money, he only has 2 options: either sell the factory to pay double what he owes, or face the consequences. However, Norm comes up with another idea. Eden will sign over the factory and transfer control to him, so he can forget about the debt and continue running things as just another employee. Eden, however, refuses to hand over what he has built for so many years and argues for a few minutes until Bull gets tired and takes him by the arm to force him to sign. In resisting, Eden ends up losing 4 of his 5 fingers, all because of a swift movement by Bull, who cuts them with a knife. In the end, Eden signs and the team returns home. On the way back, Bull asks about Gary, the team member who lent Eden the money in the first place. Norm, like the rest, remains silent, a clear sign that something is being hidden from him. This causes him to drive quickly to his house, where he discovers Gary's car parked outside. It turns out that he and his wife Jima are having an affair. Despite being betrayed, Bull remains calm. For him, Jima means nothing, and she can sleep with whomever she wants. His only concern is Aiden, his son, with whom he spends the night while contemplating what the next day in the city will bring. Norm then reveals to Gary that Bull is after Aiden, and surely is also looking for him. And considering the brutality etched in his heart, Gary does not want Bull to catch him alive. So he must prepare to kill, or be killed quickly. Immediately afterward, they go to the house of March, Bull's mother, and interrogate her about Aiden's whereabouts. She doesn't know anything, her mind is fragile, and she can barely remember to take her pills in order. However, Norm, who is cruel, decides to send a message to Bull and deals her a couple of blows so that when Bull finds her, he will know that she is still alive. When Bull arrives at his mother's house, he finds her on the floor with a deep wound on her forehead and very shallow breathing. He offers to take her to the hospital, but she tells him that she is ready to leave. In a tense and heartbreaking moment, Bull puts his hand over his mother's mouth and helps her leave this world. We return to the past, where we see that after the infidelity, Bull completely abandoned his feelings for Jima, focusing only on Aiden, something that Norm did not like very much, as he couldn't bear to see his daughter suffer, even though she had caused everything. With much confidence, Norm tells him that Gary and Jima will start a relationship, so Bull should steer clear of her, and consequently will no longer be part of the organization. Upon hearing this, Bull admits that he had known about the affair for some time, but did nothing out of respect for Norm. However, in exchange for permanently stepping aside, he wants full custody of Aiden. Norm, as if his daughter's wrongdoing were not enough, refuses to lose his grandson and gives Bull 48 hours to disappear from the city. It would be easier for him to kill Bull than to have him around, but he still has a certain respect for his loyalty. Once the 48 hours have passed, Bull is not only still in the city, but is also at the amusement park with Aiden. There, Marcos and Mike appear, and they take Aiden to another ride while Norm speaks with Bull. But as soon as the boy leaves, Norm pulls out a weapon and threatens him, then takes him to the parking lot where they are waiting for Gary and Jima. At that point, Bull lets his anger out and hurls insults at both. Gary, who couldn't be more of a coward, excuses himself by saying that Jima seduced him and that it wasn't his fault. A second later, Norm grows tired of hearing Bull's insults towards his daughter and hits him on the head with the handle of the weapon. Then they shove him into the trunk and prepare to take him away. We return to the present, where Bull has caught Mike in the middle of the street with his children. Seeing that Mike is defenseless, Bull greets his old colleague confidently and invites the children to the amusement park. Mike, knowing that if he refuses he will have to get into the car, is so terrified that he nearly soils his pants. Bull then asks Mike about Gary's whereabouts. Mike, who is 2 seconds away from wetting his pants, confesses that he hasn't known for years because they left the city, but he still has a phone number. He promises that if Bull lets him go, he will arrange a meeting as promised. Mike calls Gary at the amusement park, where Bull surprises him from behind, plunging a huge knife into his groin, then tells Mike he can leave. He then takes Gary to the musical chairs game, where in less than 2 seconds, Gary confesses that Jima was unfaithful and moved to Canford, a nearby city. Additionally, he admits that she became addicted to cocaine. Bull takes the opportunity to say everything he couldn't say that night 10 years ago. And then he slices Gary's leg in such a way that blood starts gushing out in torrents. Gary's screams of pain are drowned out by the children laughing and playing. When the game is over, Bull gets out and leaves Gary's body at the game without wasting any time. He drives into the city and finds the first trafficker he can in a bar and gives him a beating so that the trafficker takes him to his boss. Once they reach the apartment, the guy pretends to be brave, and Bull takes him by the arm and a second later cuts it with his knife. The blood from the severed arm soaks the floor. Bull then takes him to the kitchen and cauterizes the wound. Now that he knows Bull is not someone to lie to, the man confesses that he knows Jima and gives an address. That same night, Bull is standing in front of his ex-wife, who is completely consumed by panic, listening as Bull gives her simple instructions. Call Norm and tell him you saw me sleeping outside the house in a car. Jima obeys and calls her father, who promises that he will arrive soon. Then Bull grabs her by the neck and uses tape to restrain her. A little later, when Norm arrives to defend his daughter and put an end to everything once and for all, he finds himself at a dark house and is surprised to see that Bull is waiting for him. Bull quickly overpowers him. After all, Norm is wicked, but that doesn't excuse his old age. Then he drags him to where Jima is and begins to choke her father in front of her while asking how Aiden died. Finally, through her tears, she confesses that Aiden is still alive. He was simply abandoned on the street because she did not want to raise him. Upon hearing this, Bull stops, and just when we think he is about to forgive Norm, he stands up, grabs the old man's shotgun, and blows Jima's head off before suffocating Norm and leaving. That night, he finds Aiden under a bridge on 4th Avenue. He takes him in his arms and brings him to a nearby church, where the next morning he begs the rector to take care of him, promising to send money every week. However, he doesn't want Aiden to know that he is still alive. He has become a ruthless monster and does not want that for him